Yep. Good afternoon, Minnesota. I just outside when I gathered with this group, and you'll get to hear from each of them, a group that is fundamentally what makes Minnesota, Minnesota, a place of beauty and kindness and humor and decency. There are mentors of mine in this room. And in a week of pain and anger and the lack of humanity and fear, I felt a weight was lifted off my heart just being in the presence of the people who are here. And for all that beauty and all that decency and all that kindness that make us the North Star state, Minnesotans sitting up here viscerally understand an inherent racism that moves through. From our founding to the lynchings in Duluth 100 years ago to the murder of George Floyd. We know who we are, and we know where we must do better. We know where we've left some behind, and we know where we've made others invisible. Much work needs to be done. We must seek justice for George Floyd. We must vow to make equity and inclusion more than buzzwords that come up. We must allow this community to grieve, and we must vow to do better. What we've seen over this week and that visceral pain to watch George Floyd be murdered in front of the world made us dig deep on who we are. These activists were there. These leaders were there. These community organizers and change agents were there to lift their community up. And they took that voice where they should, to the streets, to the places where people who can make a difference are there. And they peacefully exercised their First Amendment rights and expressed their rage in a way that said, this must not stand. We must have justice. We in Minnesota must do everything we can to protect and lift that voice up. We must do everything we can to create the space where that can happen, and it will happen today. But I want to be very clear. What started out as a community and a state trying to make ourselves better and understand where we failed, to demand justice and express righteous anger, has morphed into something very, very different. What we've seen on the streets of Minneapolis and St. Paul over the last 48 to 72 hours has nothing to do with what these people have done to build Minnesota. We have had wanton destruction of black businesses and black infrastructure. We have destroyed landmarks of the nation's largest indigenous communities that ripped a hole in the soul of a people that have been oppressed from the minute we became a state. We stand on the land of the people who created that, and the people who were on the streets last night burned it down. They are not us. They do not share our values. They destroyed our public libraries and our public infrastructure. The chaos created stopped us from delivering school meals to hundreds of thousands of hungry children across this state at a time of COVID-19. They want nothing to do with the decency. They want nothing to do with what we strive for. They can't say the name Philando Castile because they don't know the history. They're not here to make that difference. This group is. So as Minnesotans, don't listen to me. Listen to these voices. I listen to them. As a white man who walks through life with that privilege, walk in these shoes. Walk in these communities. They took me in. They set me down. They challenge me when I'm wrong. They teach me what it looks like, and they advocate for change and try and hold me accountable. When I fail them, they tell me. When we succeed together as truly one Minnesota. And so with that, as a group of mentors here, none more important to me, someone who stands for the first time in 8 weeks in the same room, my friend, a leader in this community, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Buju, Peggy Flanagan, and Dishnakaz, Babagan, Ganikag, Nandun Chaba, Mangan and Dodame. My name's Peggy Flanagan. I'm Lieutenant Governor of the state of Minnesota, and I'm a member of the White Earth Nation of Ojibwe. And my family is the Wolf Clan. And the role of our clan is to ensure that we're not leaving anyone behind. And that work could not be more important than this moment that we find ourselves in right now. As we've come together as community, it has been tremendously difficult to not reach out and to embrace each other. Because as we were watching our communities fall apart, the moment to connect, the moment to physically touch and care for one another is one of the things that we are prevented from doing right now. But because of the importance of this moment, as the governor mentioned, this is the first time that we have been in the room together because it matters that much. Now, before I became Lieutenant Governor, I was an organizer. And I was an organizer for 20 years. And when there are protests in the street, I was there. I marched behind Valerie Castile as we mourned the unjust loss of her son. And my heart and my guts are being ripped out in this moment as I also want to go to the streets. And what we've experienced in the loss and the murder on camera of our community member, George Floyd, is horrific. And that space on 38th in Chicago is sacred ground. And people should be able to come together on that sacred ground and mourn and grieve and demand change and justice in policing and every other racist system that we have that has been part of this state. But in this moment, we cannot. Because there are detractors. There are white supremacists. There are anarchists. There are people who are burning down the institutions that are core to our identity and who we are. As a member of the urban American Indian community, watching the destruction of McGizzy, an institution in our community that has been the foundation for organizing, for education, for opportunity, for building community together, is no longer there. We did not do that. We have been coming together to take care of our community. And so, this is what I ask of all of you. We need to create the space for people to be able to grieve, to come together, to mourn the loss of George Floyd. But in order to be able to do that, we need to create the space to remove the people who are doing us harm. We've watched communities step up and come together to clean the streets, to feed one another. And that is what we need to do here. One of the ways that we can care for community is to stay home tonight. Is to stay home tonight so that we can remove those folks who are harming us, so that we can remove those folks who are detracting from the memory of George Floyd and for the work that we have to do to ensure justice is done and to ensure that the 3 additional officers are held accountable. But we cannot do that until community can gather safely. So I am grateful to be in this space with all of you, to be at home as we are together in community. And it is time for us to call on each other as organizers to stay home so that we can make sure that we have the opportunity to retain our community and to be able to rebuild and recover together and do all the work that we can in the Capitol building behind us to undo these systems of racism and to move policies forward that are truly just. This swell of mourning and grief has been just below the surface, and it burst out into public. And we must take this moment to change it all. To change it all. So with that, I'd like to introduce to you our Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and thank you, Governor. And it's just, those words were incredible. And you think the heart of your community now, mourning. And with us today are these faith leaders. I've been at their churches and their synagogues and their mosques, and it is usually a moment of joy that brings us together, of worship. And today you will hear from them about where they are, and that is that everyone is in pain. It is Martin Luther King who once said that we are all tied, inextricably tied in a single garment of destiny. And what connects one of us connects all of us. And that's how we felt, all of us, and anyone with an ounce of humanity when we see the video of George Floyd's murder. When we see that his life literally evaporating before our eyes. We remember when we see that we are all inextricably tied. But we also, as we see the destruction of these sacred sites in the American Indian community, in our African American community, when we see the businesses that literally represent small businesses, people's lives and hopes and dreams torn apart, destroyed, and torched, we remember that we are also inextricably tied at that moment, and that there are so many good people in our community that had every right to show their voice and speak, but not violently and not destructively. That is not what we are about. I saw the statistics this morning as the governor laid things out for our state about how so many of the people that have been arrested are not from our state. They are not from our state. So people of goodwill that feel like I do so strongly about the wrong and injustice we saw in that video have to understand that some of these people that are coming over and doing this are not doing it for the good reasons that bring you to the streets to protest. They're doing it for bad reasons. They're not part of our state, and they're coming from the outside. So what we are asking today is that people of goodwill, people who believe in justice, people of faith, of all faiths in our community, that they stand together and they actually stay at home, but stand together in that way. We've been through a period of isolation already through this pandemic, and we know that we can't gather like we once did. But today and tonight, the gatherings and some of those people that are part of it, it is not for goodwill. So we are simply asking peaceful people that want to honor the legacy of George Floyd, that want to honor the legacy of justice, that they stay home. That would be a start. And from there, we rebuild our community. We heal. We make sure that justice is done. We enact the criminal justice reforms that we know are necessary. I was thinking about, as I looked at our rabbis and imams and reverends up here, of this old Walt Whitman poem, I hear America singing the varied songs I hear, the varied voices I hear. There are voices up here that come from very different religions, but they are all saying the same thing. There are local leaders that have been at the front lines for their people, and they want to hear their congregation sing again, but the only way we can have peace is if we all find it within us. Parents calling their kids, that'd be a great idea. Kids calling their parents today, what should I do? What's the best way to seek justice? Families talking to each other. And then we can move forward as a community. But we cannot move forward when people are burning down our city, burning down our state. That is what we are united behind today. Thank you. I think it may be our fantastic Attorney General who's been a voice of justice, Keith Ellison.
Friends, I want to be real clear. We need your help to comply with the curfew, straight up. If anybody's unclear about what we're asking for, that is what we're asking for. Okay, why? Because the people who are trying to tarnish the reputation of the noble protest for justice are out there trying to mix in with the crowd so that people will just say, oh, look at all those protesters are bad, their cause can't be just, they're just out there causing trouble. We know that's not what's happening. We know that the noble, just aims of the protesters are righteous and good. But we also know that some evil elements are literally interfusing themselves with the protests to destroy and cause arson so that the whole community will have a low opinion of the protest because they're not for justice for Mr. Floyd. They're against it. And they know that if we protest righteously and peacefully and justly, their public sentiment will rise up to support our demands. They want to stop that. And so we need people to help us get off the streets. You can go on social media, you can protest there, you can do all these things, but to be on the street after 8 means that we can't get you separated from the bad people. So we know you're brave, we know you're strong, we know you never compromise on justice, we know you're righteous, and we believe in what you're doing, but we need to be able to stop the burning and the looting and the destruction. I want to let you know, we had some great leaders around this room. I know them all, love them all. And I want to speak to the protesters. I love you. Many of them wanted to be here today. When we called them, they said, hey, we're with the governor. We believe in what you're doing. But we're on the streets trying to restore order and to raise the issue of George Floyd. So we can't come in because we're on the street, but we want you to know that we're with you. That is a fact. So as I take my seat, look, one officer has been arrested, charged with murder. It's a preliminary complaint. It's still going on. As a lawyer, I can tell you complaints are amended. Charges could be increased. There could be some added. There might be other people who will be charged as well. We're in the beginning of this. As a signal to you that we know that there is probable cause to support this complaint, and the wheels of justice are moving, and now they're moving swiftly. But we need you to help us. Make sure that justice is done. And we know that, yes, we will invest to rebuild our communities. What in the world is burning down Migizi or juxtaposition arts on the north side have to do with justice for Floyd? Nothing. So let me take my seat, because better voices than mine can tell you about the urgency, but I want to be clear. We're asking for you to let the National Guard have the street after 8 so that we can make sure that we restore order and build justice. And with that, I want to invite my dear friend and yours, Reverend Dr. Chavez Russell.
Good afternoon, Minnesota. My name is Reverend Dr. Chavez Russell of Greater Friendship Missionary Baptist Church and the Minnesota State Baptist Convention. And as a native of Mississippi and a resident of Minnesota for the last 20 years, and an African-American, successful African-American man, I can tell you that I feel the pain, felt the pain growing up, felt the pain throughout college, going to a 95% evangelical white college, moving to Minnesota, experiencing that same systematic pain, and the pain against our own people. And how I get through it is the same way that my ancestors have gotten through it over the last 400 years. And that is coming together and leaning and depending on the power of God. Every moment in our history where we face this type of destruction, face this type of attack, we came together leaning and depending on the power of God. And when I see our community right now, when I see people cleaning up, when I see people offering food, when I see people offering to deliver food and do whatever needs to be done to overcome this evil, because that's what it is. Because our Bible says that we battle not against flesh and blood. We're battling against evil. So I'm calling on the believers in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and the people of God in general, regardless of what background you come from, to stand for love, because God is love. Continue to come together. Continue to fight against this evil that we face today that's trying to tarnish the name of George Floyd. So yes, I am asking that we do protest and use our voices loudly to represent love and the power of God and justice, so that we can make the systematic changes so that my kids don't feel the same pain that I felt for the last 41 years. So yes, we are asking that you go home at 8 o'clock and pray. And I need somebody that believes in the power of prayer to get on your knees tonight so that we can give room to our government that's been working so hard with us, partnering with us. Give them the room to separate the good from the bad. Separate those that are standing for justice versus those that are standing to tear down our government and all of our institutions and all of our neighborhoods and all of our things that we do to take care of our community. We ask that you give them the room and pray. And just like our ancestors have done, lean and depend on the power of God. And once we do that, we can begin this healing process, because I don't know about you, but I believe in Minnesota. And I believe we will rebuild. I know we will. Rebuild our institutions, rebuild our relationships with our youth, rebuild our relationships with our law enforcement, rebuild our relationships with our government, and rebuild our beloved community to honor the name of George Floyd. Amen. And with that being said, I want to introduce Rabbi Aaron Winninger to the podium. Thank you.
My name is Rabbi Aaron Weininger. I'm a rabbi at the Adath Yeshurun congregation in Minnetonka, and with Rabbi Jill Crimmings, one of the co-chairs of the Minnesota Rabbinical Association. We must fight the pandemic of racism with the same resolve, tenacity, and compassion that we are fighting COVID-19. There is no excuse to do anything different as we remember the memory of George Floyd as a blessing. You might ask how we might do that work of fighting this pandemic of racism. In our sacred scripture as a Jewish people, the Torah, we read in Deuteronomy, "Justice, justice, you shall pursue." The rabbis pose the question, why is the word justice repeated twice? Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Justice, justice. I want to suggest that we repeat the word justice twice because we have to name and call out the injustice in front of us, the current moment that we're in, the horrible murder of George Floyd. Name it for what it is, the brutality, the racism, calling out that first justice clearly and unambiguously. And that second justice, that second use of the word justice, is for us to reflect how we do that. How we do that as Minnesotans, how we do that as people of faith, how we commit to that, certainly as a Jewish community across this great state, how we commit to justice, how we make sure to sideline those who are undermining that very first pursuit of justice, how we make sure to call out the injustice of white supremacy, how we call out the injustice of those from outside of our state who are perverting that call for justice. So that when we say justice, justice, you shall pursue in the Torah, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, that we are clear and unambiguous about this current moment of justice that calls us to rise in peace, that calls us to stay home tonight. And that second form of justice, that we remember how to dismantle the systems of racism that have brought us to this point. And that we turn to our allies and that we ourselves in the Jewish community serve as allies and witnesses of this moment. And so we call out to the Holy One of Blessing by calling out to one another, justice, justice, may each of us pursue. Thank you. Our next speaker will be Amelia Gonzalez Avalos.
Thank you, everybody, for their words of wisdom and resilience. My name is Emilia Gonzalez Avalos, and I'm an executive director of Navigate Unidos Minnesota. And our organization is based in Lake and Bloomington, right on the second floor of Mercado Central, that place where a lot of people call the heart of the Latino community. And I want to speak about the heart of the Latino community and the Latino community that I know and love and that I'm part of. Yesterday, I saw public demonstrations of love and solidarity with a clear and deep consciousness that the struggle that took many to the streets is righteous, that we need to solve the very old problem of inequality. And for that, we need everybody and everybody's voices. What I saw were small business owners, Black and brown, Indigenous, Somali, Mexican, Salvadorians, taking care of the little legacies and their little businesses that are the lifelines for many of our community. What I saw were forms of public love when they brought tables to the streets with water and food and emergency aid kits and Band-Aids and kind words for people that were passing by. I witnessed deep love for the community of Lake Street. But I also saw another story. I saw folks that nobody recognized as our neighbors, as our colleagues, or the people that have been in the movement and that have shown up for one another for the years that we have been involved, that were looking for opportunities to cause more harm and pain in places where there's already harm and pain by structural racism, inequality, and carelessness. And I will speak now directly to the community that I'm part of, that I'm accountable to, and that I love. Querida comunidad, necesitamos que hoy se quede en su casa y que le pida a sus jóvenes, a sus vecinos y a sus familiares que viven en la calle Lake, que por favor tome precauciones si hay niños o ancianos o gente vulnerable que tenga que salir. Le pedimos que no salga y que no tome parte hoy de los levantamientos. Le pedimos que se cuide, que cuide a su familia y que cuide a su comunidad. Que somos una comunidad resiliente, fuerte, hermosa, y que siempre hemos salido de cosas difíciles. Y también de esta vamos a salir juntos. I'm just asking folks to not participate tonight, to stay at home, to support the vulnerable, the elder, the children that live around the perimeter of Lake Street, to ask if there's a relative that they can talk to, or if they want to call us, so that we can help them move away from the area. That we will work together and work hard to recover the heart of the Latino community that we share with so many other communities. I want to give a special recognition, a special shout out to the folks of the American Indian Movement that were so present yesterday, supporting and defending and taking care of each other and one another. To the indigenous community of Little Earth, you guys know how to love, and we felt that. Thank you so much for that. And thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Alfred Babington Johnson. I am the CEO of the Stair Step Foundation and the convener of His Works United, which is the largest coming together ecumenically of African American churches and the Nation of Islam. This moment that we're in is such a poignant and pregnant moment, and it seemed to me that the wisdom of the moment for me comes out of Romans 14 and 16. And it says simply, don't let your good be evil spoken of. For me, this time that we're in, facing this pandemic that has ravaged our community horribly, in the midst of that darkness, we've seen so many bright lights. We've seen our churches come together, Reverend McAfee at New Salem feeding hundreds of people, Reverend Ronnie Patterson in St. Paul, James Thomas, Bruce Carpenter, feeding folk in the midst of this and reaching out to support people who might feel alone and estranged in this season. And so horrible, but wonderful. And then this last Monday evening, a moment that has to be forever etched on the consciousness of anyone who saw the video of this brutal act of inhumanity and murder. More graphic, I think, than anything that I've ever seen. And out of that came an outrage, a moment of outrage and enlightenment, and an opportunity for all of us to say, no, this must stop. This injustice, this racism, this police brutality must stop. And then we saw a bright light come out of that, because early Tuesday morning, Chief Arradondo and Mayor Fry called together Black clergy and activists and shared with us their concerns of the moment, told us about the FBI and the BCA, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and their work. And the community turned to the mayor and the chief and said, but we're looking at you. We're looking at what you're going to do. And they responded in an unprecedented fashion. We asked that they terminate those officers. They hadn't the ability then to try and execute them, but terminate them. And they responded, we will do this. This is the right thing to do. And so out of that horrific moment came another season in which we stood together with the chief and the mayor and could stand around him with gang leadership and community activists all saying together, this we agree together must stop, we're going to change it, and justice must come forward. And so then the protests, the comings together to say, okay, charge them, try them. And out of that, as the police were there facing all kinds of instigators, the Black community stood between the police and the agitators to say, no, peacefully, yes, but no, you must not antagonize, throw rocks, or what have you. And so there was a great kind of unity in the spirit of the community coming out of this. And then acts of arson, unfortunate lootings, in a season in which we have the pandemic and unemployment. What is the sense and what would the strategy be to destroy the Cub Foods on Broadway or on Lake Street so that folk in the community don't have any place to go to get food? And more than that, who's working in those stores who are now unemployed? That's not an act of justice for George Floyd. That's an outrage. Don't let your good be evil spoken of. All the efforts to get justice that were legitimate are now shrouded and distorted by actions that are not of our community. So when the governor, who's been working with us wonderfully, and the Commissioner of Public Safety, who's been working with us wonderfully, and supporting the cause of justice, are now saying, we see things happening here that shouldn't be. And the only way we can deal with them is if those who are doing good won't allow evil to be spoken of our good. Yes, we must honor this curfew because this situation must be dealt with. So we encourage you, as requested, don't let your good be evil spoken of. Don't let it be distorted. Honor this curfew that this may come to a conclusion. We're delighted that the junior senator, state of Minnesota, Tina Smith.
I stand here with humility, with love for my beloved community, with commitment to do justice for George Floyd, with a painful awareness of the hard work ahead in our community to root out the racism that is too much a part of our state. And I stand here with anger at the evil that is destroying and burning and desecrating the community that we love so much. I am here to listen to these community leaders, to take your counsel, and to ask my fellow Minnesotans to raise up your voices in righteous protest. That is how we change this state and this country so that it is worthy of all of us. And then I ask you to go home by 8 so that we can keep our neighbors and ourselves and our beautiful communities safe. I would now like to welcome Mary Merrill up to the podium.
Thank you. I come this afternoon, with a heavy heart. And it's heavy because I represent an organization. My name is Mary Merrill, and I represent an organization by the name of Sabathani. And over 50 years ago, Sabathani rose out of the turmoil and the journey that we were moving forward in this country for civil rights, for fairness, for liberty, for justice in our community. And it feels so much right now like that time. I was just a teenager or just a student over at the University of Minnesota. And so it's particularly painful what we've been going through. We've continued to go through stuff for sure, but to have this young man brutally and coldly, with a cold heart, just murdered, and to have that in front of our eyes was just so painful and so hurtful to many in my community, and I think across the city. And as we gathered to say one more time, as we've gathered so much in the recent years, we won't be stopped. We won't let this continue to happen in our community. We gathered one more time to say how we were going to prevent this from happening. It was, in some cases, just a little too much. And so there was the rage to say, we've done this before. When will it end? How can we change things? And as we began to gather together to gain the strength that we needed from each other to face this awful, awful disease of racism one more time. Here we are in a pandemic that we've been dealing with for the last 3-4 months, and then on top of that, the old disease of racism and hatred reared its ugly head one more time. And we had to feel that pain, but then we had to figure out, how are we going to rise one more time? How shall we rise, as Maya Angelou says? And still, even in this pain that we're in our community, and still we rise. And we rise to say, we are going to make real change. We're going to make real change in our community. We are going to work together to figure out how somehow we're going to break this continuum of racism, this disease of racism. We're going to fight that war. Charles Jenkins, who's a gospel musician in Chicago, says, this means war. What does that mean? It means that we're in a war with the COVID-19 virus, but we're also in a war in our community for fairness, for justice, for liberty. And so with that fight, we're going to continue to go, and we're not going to be co-opted. We're not going to be co-opted. We're not going to be co-opted. We're going to fight the good fight, and we're not going to let other people come in and whatever their agenda is, change the agenda that is so that we've been struggling with for 400 years. We're not going to let that happen. We are going to look for real change. This young man and the many young men and women that I can name names that could go on all morning long or all afternoon long, they're going to get justice, and we are going to have justice, and we are going to live and be a society that strives for the best, to move forward, the best of each of us. We can't do that with what's going on, what's happened the last night or two in my community. I felt so hurt that I felt co-opted, that the message that we were bringing forward, that the pain of years of racism was now being co-opted for another agenda, for another's agenda. We can't let that happen. We can't let our people be senselessly killed or hurt or maimed or whatever in any way. We have to take this opportunity to tell our story our way. And that would include the fact that there is a curfew, that we need to not be the victims in this. And our children need to not be the victims. My 19-year-old grandson, or 17-year-old grandson, excuse me, said to me last night, Grandma, we have to go there. We have to be there. We have to show that we stand in solidarity. I said, we need to show that we're in solidarity, but we're not going to be a part of the looting. We're not going to be a part of that message that's being sent by people who don't necessarily believe in what we believe in. But we will stand. We will stand as we have always stand, and we will rise as our community has always risen to meet, in the words of Patty Hickman, we still have so much work to do. We still know that there is work to do and that we must work very, very hard, and that all of this that we talk about now, if we do nothing after after we return to normal hours, if we do nothing to figure out how we make real change in our community, then we will continue to face this situation over and over again and open ourselves up to being co-opted by other agendas. So I urge you to stay home tonight to honor the 8 o'clock hour, and to allow the governor and the people who work for the governor, all of the armed forces, to show that we can trust them, and if we don't trust them, we trust our governor to make sure that our agendas move forward in the future. So I ask you to stay home tonight, but then to get up the next day and let's go to work, because we still have so much work to do.
I'm Robert Lilligren. I am a citizen of the White Earth Ojibwe Nation, and I am chair of the Metropolitan Urban Indian Directors, which is a half-century strong leadership forum of now some 36 Native organizations across the metropolitan area. And I am here first to say our Native community here stands in solidarity with the African American community, all of our communities and brothers and sisters, to mourn the loss of George Floyd, and to stand for justice for this murder and for all of the murders that have happened at the hands of the Minneapolis police and police forces across the nation. I want to say Chi-miigwech, thank you very much to our governor, our lieutenant governor, this administration, the mayors of Minneapolis and St. Paul, all the others who are standing up for justice and trying to protect our communities. I want to thank our brothers and sisters represented here, all of the communities across Minneapolis, and a special shout out to my South Minneapolis peeps and the people who have come to support the Native community there. It's been incredible as we try to keep our relatives safe, our neighbors safe, our assets safe, and we need to keep doing that. And so I am asking everyone tonight, keep fighting for justice, keep raising your voices, and tonight at 8 o'clock, get out of those demonstrations, take your friends, take your relatives, and get out. We need to be able to allow the authorities to tell who's really there for justice and who's there for other reasons. So you need to get out and stay safe, because there will be a tomorrow and there'll be a day after tomorrow. We can work with this administration, all these good people represented here, all the good people, to build a better Minnesota. We can no longer ignore the deeply rooted racism in our culture and institutions here. It is laid bare for the whole world to see now. We have to do something, and we need you to be around tomorrow and the day after tomorrow to help us do that. And I'll remind us all that we are here today, my Native relatives, against all odds. And we are here as the answer to our ancestors' prayers. And our ancestors would want us to be here to survive tonight, to go home, stay safe, take care of yourselves, take care of your families, take care of your communities, so we can bring the indigenous voice, the indigenous lens that will build a fairer and more equitable Minnesota. So please, my friends and relatives, 8 o'clock tonight, leave the demonstrations, go take care of community, take care of family, take care of yourself. Chi-miigwech. It is now my honor to introduce Lul Osman.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lul Osman, and I'm from St. Paul. I grew up in St. Paul. I live in St. Paul. I spend majority of my time in St. Paul. I also work out of St. Paul. I have a nonprofit organization by the name Brave Foundation. I'm a state employee. So a lot of the work I do is in the Twin Cities. I wanted to start off by saying George's name, George Floyd. I don't want us to forget the purpose of coming together to protesting. And I don't want these agitators to distract us from our main mission. Our mission is to get these officers to be prosecuted. They have one, the DA, in custody. There's 3 more. We need those 3 more to be in custody. As we watch our city being burned down, we have to come together and find a solution, because we are realizing that we're not burning our community, it's not us. It makes no sense for us to burn our community after witnessing our Black man being murdered and killed by the people that we pay to protect and serve us. We have to give space to allow people to do their jobs and stay home tonight and honor the curfew. We can still be active. We can still be heard. We can still be fighting for justice. But we have to be strategizing and find solutions. We cannot keep allowing for our community to be demolished. It makes no sense for us not to protect our community, our assets. We grew up here. Our childhood memories are here. We foresee our children building their memories here. We have to protect our communities. We're already losing our man. We cannot lose our communities as well. I'm urging everyone to stay home today, and please honor the 8 p.m. curfew. We will remain being active. We will remain protesting peacefully. But when they ask us to stay home, to get these agitators off the streets from demolishing our community, they're using us. They're hiding behind us as they're burning down our businesses. We have to take a stand. And we have to strategize and we have to say, okay, enough is enough. Today we're gonna stay home. We're gonna let them do their job. We're gonna allow them to get these agitators and get them off the street. To our youth, we love you. We honor you. We respect you. We want you guys to be protected. We cannot afford to lose anyone else. We don't want any more innocent bystanders getting hurt. Please stay home. Please follow the curfew tonight. The only good thing that I see coming out of this, and I'm gonna say it out loud, is that I am witnessing my African American community, my brothers and sisters, and my Somali community finally becoming allies. That is the beauty. Now let's become allies and strategize smart and stay home and get these people who are destroying our communities that are coming from different states, different cities, destroying where we grew up, where we call our home. This is not fair. We cannot watch our brothers being murdered and then on top of that, watch our communities being demolished and then trying to blame us. But I'm so grateful that we have the leaders that we do that can stand up and say that it's not within our community. I will leave with this. Please, Guriga Joga, Hafada Joga, Minikin Joga. I don't need any more dialogues. Those are the dialogues I know. Please stay home. I am honored to call on to our next representative, Clarence. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Clarence Castile. I am the uncle of Philando Castile and the director of the Philando Castile Relief Foundation. A wise man once said that protest and riot are the voices of the unheard. I have two examples of the unheard. One is Philando Castile. When he was pulled over by that St. Anthony police officer, the officer told him to give him his license and insurance. And as he was reaching for his driver's license, the officer said, "Don't reach for it." Philando said, "I'm not reaching." The officer said again, "Don't reach for it." Philando said, "I'm not reaching." And the officer fired 7 times. The officer never heard him say, "I'm not reaching." Another example is George Floyd. George Floyd laid on the ground with an officer's knee in his neck. And that young man said, "I can't breathe." He said, "I can't breathe." And the officer continued to have and apply pressure to his neck. George Floyd died because the officer did not hear him say, "I can't breathe." Riot and protest is needed sometime so that our state authorities, communities know what we're trying to say. Those victims who lose their lives because somebody doesn't hear them, it has to be said by someone else in a different way, a more stronger and a more powerful way, and that's through protesting and riots. It's not a good thing. We don't condone looting, burning, pillaging, things of that nature which destroy communities. We have to rebuild our community now. And all of these people out here, the young people who come to these, who's going and participating, looking at these riots, being a part of it, the looting and things like that, you have to know who you're with and who's doing these things, who's opening these doors. We can't be a part of that. It's a horrible thing to lose family members, people that we know and love, through this type of violence. But we want to respond, and we need the help of our authorities, our legislators, our DAs to hold people accountable for the things that they do. And when we don't get answers right away, we tend to respond in more negative ways. We think it's the right thing to do, but sometimes we have bad responses. So today I'm here to say and remind everyone that the governor has invoked a curfew from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. And we should follow that curfew. On my way into work yesterday, I mean, it was very devastating. I was driving in from Minneapolis, and as I came down 280, overlooking Minneapolis again, I saw a plume of black smoke, and it just scared me. It did something to me because I had never seen anything so devastating to see so much smoke billowing from a building in South Minneapolis. And that was part of the riot. I believe it was the Target burning over on Lake Street. And that was something that I'd never seen and something that I do not want to see again. Last night, I got several phone calls from a company called Securitas, who does alarm monitoring for the city of Minneapolis. And I got a call from about a property at 30 West Lake Street, which is right around the corner from 31st and Nicollet, Blaisdell, and First Avenue, where all of the excitement was at last night. So I went down there this morning, and to see the aftermath of that, and it wasn't a good look. I mean, smoke everywhere and rubble, buildings being torn down. But the beauty of the thing was that I saw was all the people that came out with brooms and shovels and things to clean up the neighborhood, all up and down Lake Street, probably from Hennepin all the way down to where Lake Street turns into Marshall. They were cleaning the neighborhood back up during the day, and then at nighttime the rioters and looters come back out again, and the way it's going to be, or the way it sounds, is that's not going to happen. It's not going to be as lackadaisical as it was last night, whereas they didn't enforce the curfew until late. But from what I'm understanding, that's going to happen right away. So please, young people, please stay at home tonight. Go out and protest before 8, but by 8 o'clock p.m. tonight, please go home, because it may not be a good thing. It's bad enough to have the National Guard called in, but there are some words that somebody may call in the federal army or something to that effect, which could make things a little bit worse. Please adhere to the curfew. Thank you, and everyone, please be safe. Thank you. My next person up is Imam Sadama.
My fellow Minnesotans, Assalamu alaikum. I begin with the greetings of peace. This last week, we Minnesotans have seen the worst and the best of Minnesota on display. We have seen our brother George brutally murdered by officers who acted on our authority and snuffed his life out. We have also seen Minnesotans of all ethnicities, of all races, of all genders come together as one. It warmed my heart to see Muslim and Somali business owners with their religious leaders clean the streets during the day and guard their neighbors during the night. Those are some of the good things of Minnesota that have been on display this week. Also on display is one other very horrible reality. The legitimate protests of our community is in the process of being hijacked by evildoers, by far-right extremists, by supremacists, and by people who are anti-statists. They do not believe in leaving any institution of collective benefit. They seek to tear down and destroy everything and every institution that serves and benefits all of us. My brothers and sisters who are outraged in the streets, I beg to you, I appeal to you, do not allow these infiltrators to hijack our righteous protest. Do not allow them to commit acts of arson and hide among us, using our community as human shields to protect them from law enforcement. My fellow Minnesotans, all this outrage, all this angst is because one life was unjustly taken. Let us not enable the loss of any further lives. My brothers, my sisters, I beg you, we shall continue protesting during the day. We shall continue fighting the good fight during the day. But at 7 o'clock, we will stop. We will start turning back home so that by 8 o'clock, we are all home. This is needed so that our governor and the National Guard can restore law and order so that the safety of our communities can be guaranteed. And I promise you, we are not going away. We will continue the fight against structural racism. We will take this fight to the special session of the legislature. We will fight the good fight there. But let us not endanger any more lives. Let us honor the curfew and defend and protect Minnesotans. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Botao Urabe.
Good afternoon. My name is Botao Urabe with the Coalition of Asian American Leaders. Earlier this week, we were all devastated by the killing of George Floyd. His death is a continuation of the long history of criminalization, dehumanization, and oppression of Black lives in this country. As immigrants and refugees to the U.S., our families may not have understood this history, but we inherited its legacy. Our Asian American communities have benefited from Black freedom struggles that have paved the way for us to fight for our own freedom and equal treatment in this country. So in this moment, it matters that we commit to raising our voices to say that Black lives matter. Today, I know that many of you have asked me whether you should join the protests, and I say yes. Join the protests. Be in unity to demand justice for George Floyd. You need to do that, and we should do that. It's important and it's necessary. Watching the destruction, though, of our Black and brown neighborhoods in the last 2 nights have been heartbreaking because already Black, Indigenous, Asian, Latinx communities were already suffering disproportionately from COVID-19. Our families and small businesses were already struggling. The health impacts on communities of color have been disproportionately high. And our family members have been disproportionately on the front lines of essential jobs. So I know that you're in pain. And this week, the witnessing of such disregard for life means that you feel it even more. So I want to encourage you to show up in unity at the protests, and then to honor the curfew and go home. You have heard so many leaders before me say why that is necessary. Our liberation is tied together, and I want us to stand united for Black lives this afternoon. but we can't watch another night of seeing our neighborhoods be destroyed. All the Asian businesses along University Avenue on the east side in South Minneapolis. I know it's going to take many more years for you to rebuild, but we are here with you. And for my young brothers and sisters, I know you are angry, and this is a moment where you want to show unity, but I urge you to do that and then to go home at 8 o'clock. Thank you. Oh, and I want to call up Justin Terrell.
Hello, everyone. My name is Justin Terrell. I'm the Executive Director of the Council for Minnesotans of African Heritage. First, an analysis. What happened to George Floyd is an understatement to say it wasn't his fault. What's happening to Black people and what's been happening to Black people in the state of Minnesota since the beginning is also not our fault. 100 years ago, lynching in Duluth, not our fault. Racial disparities in education, not our fault. But let me tell you this. Malcolm X said, systems are designed to do what they do. So it's not an accident that we're standing here today. And unfortunately, members of our community could have predicted this very moment. And it's time to call the question is, what is this state going to do about the problems that are facing our community? Because they are not our fault. White people in powerful places, white paper with powerful words on them, have created the circumstances that are destroying our community today. And now, white people from other communities are coming into my community, our community, for some sort of perverse poetry, as if it wasn't bad enough already. Go home, now. The fascists on the planes coming, turn around. Shut down the airport. Don't let nobody out of there. My people are in the crosshairs of an ideological battle between anarchists and fascists. This is not the America that we have built with our blood, sweat, and tears. I haven't slept in a couple of days like most of us. I took a nap at 3:30 this morning, falling asleep to the wise words of Killer Mike. Today is a day to prepare and to plan. Black people, the folks burning our community are not operating in your interest. Black people, stay home. Protect your home. Protect your loved ones. Protect your neighbors. If you haven't checked in with your neighbors to see how they plan to survive tonight, do that now. We've had enough protests, and believe me, I've done my fair share of marching. Our people are good at marching. Nellie Stone Johnson taught us how to organize in this state. Dr. Josie Johnson taught us how to organize in this state. We know what we're doing. Look out there. That's not how we get down. The community members holding down 38th Street, that's how we get down. The community members holding down Solo, that's how we get down. The community members checking on each other, feeding each other, making sure people can get out of the city to find a loaf of bread, because where are you supposed to find a loaf of bread today? That's how we get down. And I'm asking you, take the day, check on your people, prepare, plan, pack a bag, protect your home. Do not end up in the crosshairs between an ideological battle that ain't got nothing to do with us. It never has. We are not your pawns. We have a lot of work to do. We have to reimagine the justice system. We have to reimagine every system, because every system is currently failing the Black community, and it's not our fault. In doing so, We have a lot of work to do. But today, Governor Walz, we need a champion in the prosecution seat on this case. Someone the community, most of the community trust, someone who I trust in Keith Ellison. We also need to look at labor reforms, licensing. If you lose your job as a police officer for assaulting or killing somebody, please don't go work in another police department. And whatever we do, and I'll close with this, whatever we do, FBI, human rights, whatever we do, we need to take full action to ensure that we take a hard look at the organizations that perpetuate police violence in our community. I apologize. It's an emotional moment. My boys are at home playing with hearts full of love right now because they don't know what's going on. Do me a favor. Do us all a favor. On the other side of this, help me tell them a story about how Black folks came together and led our state through this moment and cut all this other nonsense out. Thank you.
To those watching, this is our Minnesota. This is who we are. This is the decency. This is the compassion, and this is the community of who we are. You hear the passion. No one up here is going to leave justice unserved. No one else is going to see this moment as just simply another moment. As so many said, justice, justice, and there is work to do. What I ask you as your work today is go home tonight. Stay off the streets. The folks who are going to come tonight are going to take this as a call, as a challenge. They want nothing more than to see a community paralyzed and visions of anarchy and chaos and fear stretched across TV stations and newspapers around the world. We will not give it to them. It is going to be dangerous on the streets of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Our law enforcement, our firefighters, our citizen soldiers who will be on the streets will be in harm's way. Many who witnessed things last night with improvised explosive devices and tactics that were reminiscent of Mogadishu and Baghdad. So I ask all of you tonight, use this as a moment to redefine of who we are. The message that the world saw here today is this is a decent state. We are not perfect, but we stand together on shared values of decency, of inclusion, and that everybody gets an opportunity. So we've got work to do. We need to prepare this afternoon. I would be glad with the press is here to take a few questions, but I would ask our guests who are here and led by some of our clergy to gather us when this finishes to say a prayer for Minnesotans. But our press who stayed here, you've been patient. This is a message that needs to be heard. This is one that Minnesotans can be proud that this is what we reflect on the world. Please, press, if there's any questions or if we're wrapped. Yeah, again, this situation will be chaotic if I think you understand what I'm telling, what you're saying is, I am bringing out everyone whose voice in community is so much stronger than mine. I'm bringing out lived experiences to tell people it is going to be incredibly dangerous. We have trained professionals out there, but the people that are there don't wear uniforms, don't play by rules, and don't share our values. They will intentionally create chaos. We will do our very best to preserve dignity, rule of law, but we have got to clear our streets. We cannot show a patience for people who care nothing about anything. So we will do the best we can as the governor of this state and as the point of Commander-in-Chief of the Minnesota National Guard and the State Patrol. It is my responsibility to make sure that they are trained and the mission is clear to them and to be executed. But in this chaotic environment, all you can do, Minnesota, is help us by staying off the streets tonight. Yeah, correct.
Obviously, they're out after 8 p.m., but they're trying to protect our
That's right.
businesses. What?
That's right. I think what I'd like to do, this is an important question, that we have community partners. I was on with many of our legislators and community leaders who are saying, we know who people are. We can identify who's people in our community. We're standing out front protecting our things. We're patrolling our neighborhoods on this. Those things are being worked right now. I think what I'd like to do is I'm going to come in front of you again before we get either late afternoon or early evening, before we get to the curfew, to try and make sure with the folks who are going to be on the ground to spell out as clearly as possible what people need to do and what some of the expectations will be. Again, like so many of this, everything we do, they will want to counter and try and destroy. Everything we do, they will try and make the case of that chaos. So we will come and describe as much as we can a little bit later, and that's a big piece of this because we do recognize that. Yeah, a lot of it is, and I don't know if I'm looking at my team around here, my expectation is to try and get this information out as quickly as possible to the press. They come from the police reports as they're booked in. It is a fairly small sample, as you're starting to see. A lot of it is coming from folks who are on the ground who are telling us too. And as I've continue to say, we say that not as a deflection that this is not a Minnesota issue. It is a very Minnesota issue that killed George. It's very much the flashpoint and what boiled there, but what has manifested since that time over the last 48 hours is much different, and we'll try and get as much information as we can on that. Yes? Well, this is the age-old question that I keep coming back to. Societies are built around shared values. They're built on a social compact. I think in my time as governor and the people I've surrounded myself with, that I would like to believe we have shown a competence that we're doing the things that need to be done. I have said I accept responsibility for the plans and as they adjust. What I can tell people is this is unprecedented in our history. It has gained the attention of the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It has now spread to 20 states, and I'm getting calls from mayors from Detroit and across the country who are deeply concerned because these folks are learning from what they're seeing here. What I would say to Minnesotans is, I know you're scared, and I know what you're seeing is terrifying, but what I would tell you is take the words from this, that there are good and decent people, and there are certainly problems in our policing, and the reforms that Justin and others talked about must happen, but there are good, decent Minnesotans who are putting their lives at risk to protect them. We know that we need to make changes, but tonight, trust in these folks being out there. We will execute to the best of our abilities. Like so many things, we can't guarantee. What I can guarantee you is every effort, every thought, everything that my team and myself and experiences of thinking about and putting into play will be executed. And of course, that will be countered by people who want to do all they can to destroy that. But we will rest assured in this case, goodness can win. Righteousness of what we need to do tonight is motivating a lot of good women and men out there that'll defend you. Yeah, I haven't heard anything yet, and I've been here with us. I will get a briefing immediately after this from them. It's one of the things that's pretty hard. I did talk to several state leaders, elected leaders who made contacts with their people on the ground, and as they described, people who are out there marching and are leading. That anecdotal one was groups from Florida is what they were hearing that were there, anarchist groups from Florida, and they were disassociating. They, being the Minnesotans, were disassociating themselves, and that really manifested itself last evening. As you said, the tactics changed in the way that the plan to try and protect those things changed because they approached it differently. I think what I'll do is I'm going to come back here in just a short time. We will bring the crew of leadership in General Jensen, Harrington, Langer, and others. But before we leave, I'd like to ask some of our clergy to gather. Senator Smith, Klobuchar, to please gather. We'll keep some social distancing, but I'd ask you to say that prayer for the Minnesota that we know and love.
Shall we bow our heads? Lord, we thank you. Thank you for your grace and your mercy.